The Batman was one of the movies that I watched in 2022, and oh my goodness. Freaking love this movie. It was so good. Oh my gosh. I mean, honestly, with DC right now, DC has been really going through a bit of a revival in recent years. With DC, it's moving away from the, cinematic universe route with, because honestly, let's be honest, the DCEU was a complete disaster. It was oh my gosh, there were so many problems with it. It was kind of dead in the water in a lot of ways when they try to go in the cinematic universe route. I'm glad they're finally trying to not copy Marvel and do their own thing and have all these movies that are can stand on their own and are actually pretty good. Because you have the Joker, you have Batman now, or the Batman, I guess, and you have I haven't seen it, but a lot of people say that the new Suicide movie is actually really good, and so I might check that out. I mean, maybe it'll be a redemption because the first Suicide movie was awful. I fucking hated that film, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, and I mean, it is interesting too because in recent years with Marvel's Phase 4, sort of after the Avengers movies finally stopped coming out, there's sort of been this drop off in interest in Marvel I have seen. And a lot of people, including fans of Marvel, has sort of been, turning against it with, the lack of originality and, I'm sort of an exemplar of that because, after Avengers Endgame, I really haven't watched any Marvel movies, honestly. After Avengers Endgame, I just didn't watch any. And I mean, I am planning to watch some, because I have Disney Plus now, I'm planning to definitely, go back and watch a bunch of Marvel movies, and I'll probably see Spider-Man No Way Home, the crossover film with all the three Spider-Mans. That's pretty interesting, and a lot of people like it, but whatever. So, but yeah, yeah, so, honestly, DC is just coming out with hit after hit, it seems like, and they're really, sort of redeeming themselves and actually putting out things of legitimately good quality again, which is really cool, and so yeah, I really like this movie, and I'm going to explain why I really liked it. And first of all, this movie looks absolutely gorgeous. Oh my gosh, it's so well directed. I loved everything about how this movie looked. Gotham looks absolutely beautiful. The shots, the lighting, it's so freaking good. I loved every single thing about the way this movie looked. And also, there were a bunch of really great action scenes that were just really cool. Especially that freaking car chase in the middle of the movie when the Batman was trying to catch the Penguin. And oh my gosh, everything about that car chase was so good. And it's just you have to wonder, how did they actually do that? Did they use a ton of CGI in that scene? It didn't look like CGI, it looked like practical effects, and, if so, oh my gosh, how did they even do that? I don't know, it's, yeah, so, a ton of really great action scenes in this, movie as well. So, also some really, intense, not necessarily action, but really, intense scenes where, it's just so tension-filled, so that, that hostage situation in the middle of the movie where, you know what I'm talking about. By the way, spoilers, I won't intentionally try to spoil anything, but I won't, hold back either. That hostage situation in the movie where, basically that guy was, obviously held hostage with a bomb by the Riddler, and, Batman was trying to, basically solve the riddle in time. Oh my gosh, that scene was so good, oh my gosh. Yeah, incredibly intense, incredibly good stuff. One of the things I really appreciated about this movie, The Batman, was that I really liked how this film narrowed in on the more detective aspect of Batman. Because, Batman is supposed to be the world's greatest detective. But in a lot of movies, that aspect of Batman's personality is still there, but it's sort of downplayed where, first thing you associate with Batman is, oh, he's like a superhero, or he's like a vigilante. But also he's supposed to be a really cool really great detective, and I like that this film really zeroed in on that aspect of him and showed a lot of the movie was focused on his detective work and trying to solve a mystery. Obviously fitting because it's the Riddler putting all these mysteries out there, and with Batman trying to solve them. So yeah, so I really like that aspect of it. I'm really happy that this movie gave more focus to that part of the character. Speaking of mysteries, like I was saying before, the Riddler is the villain of this movie, and who thought the Riddler could actually be a scary and intimidating villain? Seriously, the Riddler, obviously, the Riddler, the Riddler hasn't really been in any Batman movies since the since I think it was Batman Forever, that stupid movie with after Tim Burton stopped directing and the Batman movies just got really silly, and that movie, it was just Riddler was so ridiculous and silly in that movie, and it's just comic relief. So yeah, I honestly didn't I wouldn't expect that the Riddler could actually be serious, because I didn't really know any incarnations of him that were not really played for laughs or anything. But then in this movie, the Riddler was a really good villain, and I liked how they did a very interesting thing with him where the Riddler was basically extremely socially awkward outcast of society, and he was kind of like this mentally ill person who obviously needed a lot of help, but he was also incredibly intelligent and had this incredibly sharp mind, and I think it really worked with how they portrayed him and his character, which because not having him because having him be this basically flamboyant evil mastermind, to where he dressed up in all these fancy get-ups and all this these fancy green suits, and that probably would have been over the top and stuff, but I really like the way that they portrayed him in this movie with the way they portrayed him in this movie with how he was, and how he was basically this social outcast who was away from society and was trying to unearth all the truths and corruption of Gotham, sort of trying to be his own hero, who is in a way inspired by Batman. And I really liked how they did the Riddler in this movie. I thought that he was a really good villain. His plan was super interesting. Like I was saying before, he was basically going after the rich and powerful of Gotham because of all the massive corruption going on. Because he obviously, with his backstory, he was sort of had been personally affected by that kind of thing, with him having horrible situation in how he grew up, and how he was the situation he was in as a child, and he didn't really have any support, and so he's just sort of taking vengeance out on the rich and powerful of Gotham, who control everything that happens, and the insane corruption going on. And so I really like that aspect of it, and I thought it was really interesting. And this movie definitely has a lot to say about real important real world issues, online radicalization, about how the people responsible for systemic issues are the ones in power, and not the petty thugs on the street. And and I really liked it too, and it really relates to the Batman character, because Batman in this movie really has to grapple with how he is doing what he's doing, and why he is doing what he's doing, and how he might not be, how Batman might not be as heroic as he thinks he is, because because Batman in this movie, he says in the movie, I'm vengeance. But the thing about vengeance is that it's not really the most healthy mindset to have, because if you're basically just trying to enact revenge for what happened to you, it's not really, you might end up in the end making things worse, because if you just if you sort of just go after and try to destroy the things that you hate and destroy bad things without actually creating good things, then that can lead to a lot of problems, as we see a lot of the time in real life. And I think it was really interesting to focus on this theme in Batman's character, which you don't often see in Batman movies. So I really like that. And there will be people online, little Benny Shapiro, who Ben Shapiro, who don't like this film because it's woke, and Jim Gordon was black, and Catwoman talked about privileged white people, and screw those guys. Honestly, fuck conservatives and anti-SJWs constantly complaining about that kind of thing. Because honestly, this film was great. I really like this film. It was a really good film on its own merits, and I like that it is also enhanced by the fact that it addressed some of the moral issues with what what Batman is doing, because like honestly, because like let's be honest, Batman, sort of a vigilante that goes up and beats a vigilante that goes outside of the law and goes around beating up like a bunch of criminals, who a lot of whom are probably poor people, and like yeah, it's a little iffy, especially in like a post George Floyd world where police brutality has obviously been sort of brought to the front and center. And Batman, he's not a policeman, but he sort of does the job of a policeman, arguably maybe worse, because he has no accountability because he's a vigilante and does not work for the government. So, sort of addressing that, and sort of, addressing in this movie how Batman might not be doing the good things that, might not be having the, because obviously Batman is trying to do the right thing, but maybe with him, with Batman maybe going about it the wrong way and not using the funds that he has and the influence he has in the best ways, and not really, because like the cool thing about Batman and the things that Batman should be doing is like, it's obviously not like the best look when Batman, he isn't really working for the government, and he doesn't really have any accountability to people, to where he can pretty much do whatever he wants. But the thing that Batman, the advantage of Batman and what he does is that Batman, because he is like sort of an outcast of society and like doesn't play by the rules, he like can go after like these rich and powerful people who are, who basically control society and who are in charge of the conditions of the city and making them how they are. So Batman can be like this hero for justice, where if he, goes after the right people and sort of tries to expose the people actually in charge of, making the city of Gotham like it is, and making it so that conditions are so bad like this. But we see in the beginning of the movie that he's not really doing that, and he's basically just like going around and trying to scare random thugs by beating them up. And like, and again, is that really the best thing that Batman should really be doing? And we see like in the beginning of the movie how he says he doesn't even know if what he's doing is really making a difference, because crime has actually, increased in the city since he basically became Batman and started doing his thing. So I really like that the movie was, actually legitimately dealing with some of the moral implications of vigilantism and Batman's character. So I really like that. I thought it was incredibly interesting. And, yeah. So, in regards to Batman as a character, Robert Pattinson as Batman, I thought he was really good. And like, I know a bunch of people are gonna like hate on him and like Robert Pattinson, he's a joke because he was like he was the vampire in Twilight. And like, but honestly, I had my doubts too. Like, I really did, because from the trailers for this movie, like, it didn't really look, it kind of looked like really not very serious, because like it kind of looked like with Batman from the trailers that I saw before watching this movie, it seemed like he was trying way too hard to be moody and edgy and emo. But like, I think it seemed like it wouldn't work with Robert Pattinson's performance, but it does work. And like, I think because this movie really leans into a different interpretation of Batman, where, obviously with a lot of Batman movies and properties, like Bruce Wayne is basically portrayed as this like billionaire playboy who's like sort of really showboaty, and obviously the reason for that is because he's sort of like trying to portray this aspect of himself to separate himself from the Batman character, and to sort of like say, oh, how could I possibly be Batman when like there's no way someone like me would be Batman. But in this movie, like, Bruce Wayne is much more emotionally reserved and awkward, and like, and like at this, like, on one hand, like, you would sort of say like, oh, well, he's not doing a very good job at like protecting his secret identity as Batman, because he's like sort of acting like how Batman acts. So he's sort of very obviously he's very conserved. He's very he sort of hides away in his house all the time, doesn't really go out much. And you think, oh, well, well, he's a prime suspect to be Batman, right? Because of the way he acts and how he acts so closed off to everyone and, like, is barely seen in public all the time. And, like, that is a legitimate point, but at the same time, like, you would also kind of expect someone who dresses up as a bat and beats people in their spare time to act like this, to act, like, incredibly socially awkward and, like, not really know how to conduct himself in public, because, like, he's obviously had a lot of emotional scars and damage and, like, psychological problems. So, like, I sort of, like, it was a new interpretation of the character, and I did like it. I think it worked, and I didn't think it would work, but it did, so I liked it. And so, in regards to, I liked a lot about this movie. I really liked a lot of parts about this movie, but two complaints I have that I think did sort of negatively impact the movie in some ways is that, so I think one complaint is that I think some of the shots in this movie just linger a bit too long. Like, obviously, like, this movie is very it's directed very well, but I did think, like, that some of the shots, like, they did just linger very long, which is like, okay, we don't need to see, like, an entire, like, 20-minute sequence of Batman walking towards the camera. Like, we speed it up a little. Come on, guys. Like, so I did think that some of the shots lingered a bit too long. But, and the second complaint, and which is probably a bit more major, is that, like, I think it didn't really make much sense to me to why the Riddler's plans, like, because the Riddler is this villain in the movie who's basically sort of challenging Batman on his ideology, because he's basically doing, arguably he's doing kind of, because the Riddler is basically, like, sort of the dark mirror to Batman, where the Riddler is kind of, like, has been inspired by Batman to, like, sort of take action into his own hands, and is arguably, like, accomplishing more than Batman by, like, legitimately going after, like, the rich and powerful people. But he's also, like, doing it in these very extremely immoral ways, where he's, like, ruthlessly murdering people and, like, setting their dead bodies up. And, like, but, the Riddler sort of had this code where he thought what he was doing was right, because he was going after these, like, powerful people who, like, had all these, corruption scandals and, like, all the terrible things that they did going on. But, like, at the end of the movie, the Riddler's plans basically change from just targeting the rich and powerful to wanting to cause mass damage and loss of life by, like, basically, creating this massive flood which would kill a bunch of people and, like, regular civilians. And, like, I don't know, it just didn't like jive with me, because, like, obviously you have to have this climax for the movie, but, like, I don't know, it's sort of just, like, basically, this is a thing that movies and media do a lot, where they'll have this villain that is basically doing all these things for what they perceive to be the greater good, and then at the end, basically, at the end of the story, at the end of the season or the movie or whatever, what'll basically happen is they'll do this really incredibly bad, indefensible thing, so that basically the audience is so that the audience really can't actually have any sort of moral qualms about, like, beating the bad guy, because the bad guy is obviously doing this obviously bad thing, even though beforehand they were actually kind of doing some good and kind of having a point, where it's just this thing that a lot of movies and media do, where they'll just have the bad guy who is doing all these things for a moral reason and something they think is right, but then at the end they'll just do this terrible thing that can't really be defended, so that so that the audience knows, oh, they're obviously the bad guy. And I don't know, that just sort of, it didn't ruin the Riddler's character for me, but it was just kind of odd, and I didn't really care for it. So anyway, so in addition to the Batman and the Riddler, and I also really liked all the rest of the cast. Like, Jim Gordon was great. I loved him in the movie. Colin Farrell was fantastic as the Batman. Like, no, sorry, not the Batman. Colin Farrell played the Penguin, and he was fantastic, even though he didn't really have, like, this super important part in the movie. He was just, like, he had so much charisma in, like, every scene he was in. So yeah, like, this movie, yeah, the Batman, this movie was just really great. I really liked it, and I can't wait for the sequel. Like, yeah, the Batman was awesome, and you should definitely check it out. So, yeah, that's basically what I thought about it. If you have your thoughts, leave them down in the comments below. This has been the Aromantic Shipper. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, remember, just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye!